Something huge is happening on the internet right now, and it's all kicking off in Australia. A brand new law is about to completely change the game for young social media users, and believe me, the shockwaves are already spreading across the world.
Okay, so here's the headline. As of December 10th, 2025, Australia is effectively banning social media for anyone under the age of 16. This is not a suggestion, it's the law. And in fact, platforms like Meta have already jumped the gun, deleting hundreds of thousands of accounts belonging to Australian teens.
And we're talking about the big ones: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, X, you name it. And get this, parents can't give permission. It's not an option. If the platforms don't comply, they're facing absolutely massive fines. We're talking almost 50 million Australian dollars for every single violation. This is a really big deal, and yeah, other countries are watching very, very closely.
So, how are we going to break this all down? Well, first, we'll look at what the ban actually is. Then, we'll get into why it's happening. After that, we'll cover the pushback. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at what this means for the rest of the world. Let's start with the ban itself.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, Australia's unprecedented ban. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what this new law really does.
So, the official name is the Online Safety Amendment Act. And what's really key here is who it targets. This isn't about punishing kids or parents, it's aimed squarely at the tech companies. They're the ones who have to take reasonable steps to enforce this age limit. And unlike a lot of other proposals you might have heard of, parental consent is not a loophole. The government has drawn a hard line.
So, you're probably wondering, which apps are we talking about here? Well, the ban really zeroes in on platforms with those algorithm-driven feeds, like Facebook and TikTok. Your direct messaging and gaming apps like Messenger, WhatsApp, and Discord, they're exempt, for now. YouTube is in a weird spot, partially banned, but its educational content is still okay. The government's been pretty clear that this list could change as the tech evolves.
And if you want to know how serious they are, just look at this number. Almost 50 million Australian dollars. That's about 33 million US dollars. It sends a pretty unmistakable message to big tech. You either comply or you open your wallet big time. This is not a slap on the wrist. It is a financial sledgehammer.
Okay, but how on earth are they going to enforce this? Well, it all comes down to age verification. Platforms now need to make you prove you're 16 or older. We're talking about showing government IDs, taking AI-powered video selfies, that kind of thing. And companies are already moving. They're culling hundreds of thousands of accounts. Teens who are affected are getting a heads up with a chance to download their photos and data before their accounts go into hibernation until they turn 16.
All right, so that's the what. Now let's get into the why. What pushed Australia to take such a massive, unprecedented step? This is the government's argument for why this is also necessary.
And this quote from Australia's e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, really sums up the whole idea. The goal here is to create a kind of developmental buffer zone, to give kids time to grow up without being subjected to what she calls the unseen forces of social media, those addictive algorithms and the endless scroll that are literally designed to keep you glued to the screen.
And look, this isn't some out-of-touch government policy. They have massive public support. A YouGov poll showed that a whopping 77% of Australians are on board with this age limit. So this is really reflecting a widespread concern that's been bubbling up for a while.
And that concern is driven by some really startling numbers. I mean, take a look at this. Since 2015, which is right when social media really took over, teen depression and anxiety rates in Australia have literally doubled. Hospitalizations for self-harm among young girls, up 250%. And during the debates in Parliament, the phrase social media is a harm was apparently said more than 40 times. This is the evidence that lawmakers keep pointing to.
Okay, so that's the case for the ban. But as you can imagine, not everyone is on board, not by a long shot. Let's flip the coin and look at the pushback and some of the really serious problems this law is facing.
And the voices pushing back aren't just corporations. This is Noah Jones, a 15-year-old who's actually a plaintiff in a high court challenge against the ban. For him, this isn't just about losing an app. He feels like it's silencing an entire generation of young people and cutting them off from their communities, both at home and around the world.
And then you have the tech giants, like Meta, who are raising a totally different kind of alarm bell. They're basically saying, look, the only way we can really enforce this is to ID check everyone. And they argue that doing so would create a massive privacy nightmare and a goldmine for identity thieves, affecting every single user, not just teenagers.
So, this is really the heart of the debate, isn't it? On one side, you have the argument for protection. Shield kids from harm, make big tech accountable. And on the other, you have this argument for freedom and privacy, warning that this could silence young people and, ironically, even push them toward darker corners of the internet. And the problems don't stop there. There's that high court case. You've got more than 140 academics who've come out and called this a blunt instrument. There's the practical problem of workarounds. I mean, kids are resourceful, they'll use VPNs. And maybe the most critical point, what about isolated youth? Kids in rural areas or LGBTQ+ teens who rely on these online spaces to find their community. This could really hurt them.
And all of this brings us to the biggest piece of the puzzle. Because make no mistake, this is not just about Australia. What we're watching is the beginning of a massive global experiment, and every government on the planet is watching. Think of it like this. Australia just kicked over the first domino. Within 48 hours, Malaysia said, hey, we're doing that too. The UK, Canada, the EU, they're all watching intently. Even states in the US like California and New York are floating similar ideas. The dominoes are lined up, and they could start to fall really, really fast.
For the platforms themselves, this is a nightmare scenario. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Their choice is either to implement this really intrusive, privacy-invading age verification system for every single person, or just pull out of countries one by one. It's a lose-lose that could lead to a totally fractured internet, where the rules are different everywhere you go.
But here's the million-dollar question, or maybe the $50 million question. Do these kinds of age gates actually work? Well, if we look at history, the track record isn't great. France has a less strict law, and more than 60% of kids just bypass it. China tried to limit gaming for young people, and it just created a huge black market for accounts. Nobody has ever managed to successfully age-gate the internet on this scale. Australia is officially the guinea pig.
So, when you boil it all down, what's the takeaway? It's simple, really. Whether you think it's a great idea or a terrible one, Australia has just kicked off the biggest child safety experiment the internet has ever seen. And that's the question we're all left with. Is this the start of a safer but maybe more fragmented and controlled internet? Or is this a massive, well-intentioned experiment that's just doomed to fail and maybe even make things worse? We won't know the real answer for years, but the test has already begun.
Subscribe to level up your brain with the NoteMan. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story. Thanks so much for watching.